Here's a question for you. In which book do you find factory workers described this way? They become as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become. Unquote. It may surprise you to know that these words are the words of Adam Smith, the early apologist for capitalism in the 1700s. And these words are quoted approvingly as an authority by Karl Marx in his famous book, Das Kapital. It's important to realize the significance of this. Marx was an intellectual in the 1800s, and he was, like virtually all intellectuals then and today, of the opinion that working class people who did manual labor, were as ignorant and stupid as a human creature could become. There was a basic elitist view of ordinary people prevalent then and now among intellectuals, and Karl Marx was no different than the others in having that view. And I'm pointing this out as an introduction to what I hope is a relatively short video introducing the reasons why, to the surprise of many, I am not a leftist. In fact, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a communist, I'm not a Marxist, and indeed, I am fiercely critical of Marxism. Now, a lot of people are surprised to hear me say that because they know that I'm an egalitarian revolutionary. I think that we should have an egalitarian revolution to remove the rich from power, to have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. I think that we should have a society based on the principle from each according to reasonable ability, to each according to need or reasonable desire, with scarce things equitably rationed according to need, which of course sounds very much like the version that Karl Marx popularized in his critique of the Gotha program, where he talked about the principle of from each according to his ability to each according to his need. But did you know that when Marx referred to that principle, his point was that society could not be based on that principle, could not, as Marx put it in his flowery language, could not inscribe on its banners that principle, until the final phase of communism. And remember, communism is the phase that comes after socialism, and socialism is the phase in the Marxist framework that comes after capitalism. His point was that society could not be based on that principle until the final phase of communism. And why not? Because only in the final phase of communism would there be an end to scarcity, would the economy be so productive that there would no longer be any scarcity. And the thinking of Marx is that people would not share according to this wonderful from each according to ability to each according to his need principle if things were scarce. No, because people are selfish. People would not share that way if there was any scarcity. Only when there's so much that everyone can have what they need and want, only then could society be based on this good principle. So Marx was actually very critical of this wonderful principle as far as its applicability to any, point in the near or even medium future. Now, the revolution in Spain in 1936 to 9 was led by people who were not Marxists, who called themselves anarchists, and they ignored Marx's thinking on this point and created in about half of Spain a society that was essentially based on this wonderful principle of from each according to ability to each according to need. They even eliminated money altogether in parts of Spain and made it highly almost irrelevant where it wasn't eliminated outright. A lot of people have a lot of very wonderful ideas, and they're right. They are wonderful. The idea that there's a class conflict in society that explains a lot about what happens. The idea that there should be solidarity of working class people across all the borders, international solidarity. From each according to ability, to each according to need principle. There are wonderful ideas that lots of people today have, but they're often mistaken in thinking that these ideas came from Karl Marx. No, they were around before Karl Marx was even born. Karl Marx introduced what he called a science of Marxism. It's a science, supposedly, about how societies change over time. And the key thing about his science is that society will change ultimately to be a classless society with no rich and no poor and so forth, not because ordinary people, working class people, want such a society, but, according to Marx, in spite of the fact that they don't want it. The Marxist view of ordinary people is that they're selfish, that all people are selfish. The capitalists are selfish, the workers are selfish, everyone is selfish, everyone just strives for their own personal self-interest. The only thing is, according to Marx, the worker's self-interest is, for example, for higher wages, and it conflicts with the capitalist's self-interest for lower wages. And so, that creates conflict, and the Marxist science is all about how this conflict ultimately will lead to a classless society, not because workers want a society based on solidarity and mutual aid and equality, but in spite of the fact that they don't. That's what the Marxist science is all about. It's called materialism, and you can read all about it if you want to, which I have in the past. I was a Marxist once. And the thing that makes Marxism attractive to some people is that what it says is yeah, ordinary working people, they suck. They're selfish. They're racist. They're homophobic. They're they're bigots. They only think with their belly. They only have what Lenin called trade union consciousness, just wanting more and more and more. They have no desire for a classless society. Che Guevara said, you can't have socialism until you create a new socialist man and a new socialist woman, because people as they are today, they're not going to even want socialism, so you have to create a whole new kind of person. This kind of thinking is elitist thinking, and it appeals to people who have elitist ideas in their head. It says to them, yeah, I know you want a classless society, and guess what? It's going to come even though ordinary people don't want it, and even though ordinary people suck. And if you look at modern leftists today who are strongly influenced by Marxism, either knowingly or not realizing it, but nonetheless they are. They have an extremely negative attitude towards ordinary people. Practically everything they write is about how ordinary people are bad. They're racist and homophobic and selfish and sheeple and complicit in the crimes, this and that and the other. It's all they write about. And it leads to their practice, an example of which is a bunch of leftists, I don't know, about a dozen or two leftists in the Boston area a number of years ago, in the name of anti-racism, decided to use barrels with concrete and their arms, locked in them, to block both directions of Interstate 93 during the commuting rush hour in the morning, because the commuters were mainly white working class people, you see, and they're going to fight racism by literally going out of their way to antagonize white working class people, which of course they did in spades, and they were very proud of the fact. And what they did with this contempt for white working class people who are commuting on I-93 was to spread the ruling class's big lie, which is that anti-racism is just code for anti-white. They got a slap on the wrist in the court system afterwards, which I think was basically a way of saying good work, keep it up. They even blocked an ambulance with a patient in it, taking them to emergency treatment in a hospital. Well, you might say, well, these were just a bunch of crazy leftists. They're not typical of anything. But no, on the contrary, there was not a single leftist writer or organization that condemned what they did as terrible. Not a single one that I could find, and I Googled hard looking. You can try it yourself. All the leftist organizations, put it in their news and wrote it up as an anti-racist action, basically applauding them for it. The left has been one of the most serious obstacles to building an egalitarian revolutionary movement, because it does things to persuade people that being against, the capitalist ruling class means being against ordinary people and having nothing but contempt for them. The left does that over and over, as I've written about in the articles that you can see below. Well, I'm going to stop short. I'm going to post the URLs to a handful of articles I've written about why the left is absolutely wrong in its view of people and a major obstacle to building an egalitarian revolutionary movement, below in the bottom part of this video. And I hope you read them, because this is a really serious problem that we have to overcome, or we're going to remain stuck in a rut where we've been stuck for a good more than 150 years. So thank you, and I hope you give some attention to these articles. Thank you.